Good evening. My name is Bill Burkane, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We hope that we all learned something. I think we will. We've got some great and knowledgeable people here that provide us with quite a bit of information. We hope to answer a lot of questions. The format is going to be that I'll just make a few remarks, and then we're going to open it up to the panel, and we'll lead off with Dave Hull, the CEO for the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. And then we will, then the other panelists will talk. They'll come to the microphone, I hope, if that's okay with everybody, to this microphone here at this podium. And then they will, each of the panelists will make a few remarks, and then we'll open it to questions for the rest of the evening. The questions will be, we would ask you to submit your questions in writing. If you're short of pens, let me know. We'll get some pens to you. And we'll have a panel over here. This is sort of like the League of Women Voters process that they use. They have panelists over here sorting through questions and making sure they haven't been already asked. And we're going to have, at least I know of the panelists, it will be Pete Oringer and Maggie Herblin, from what I understand at this point. And that will be people from kind of both sides of the debate, sorting through the questions. I guess first off, I should try to answer the question, what is RAPIT, who are we, why are we here tonight? RAPIT is the Rail and Port Infrastructure Task Force. It's a non-incorporated group of local residents consisting primarily, yes, Pete? Okay, thank you. RAPIT stands for Rail and Port Infrastructure Task Force. We're an unincorporated association of residents of this area, and we believe that through the exchange of information, the gathering of information, the full-throated discussion of ideas relating to the effort and the need for revitalizing our economy, developing our port, restoring our railroad, and the benefits that can bring to our community, and the need for it. A full-blown discussion on that will be of benefit to the community. We hope through our efforts and through the efforts of many other people in the community that ultimately there will be a green port and a green railroad here in our region. The opportunities are such right now that it looks like it can happen. There's an awful lot of people that want to see it happen. The need is there. This area, if you're new to the area, you may not have noticed, but we are in need of good jobs with benefits. Eureka City Schools is losing 200 students a year because there's a shortage of families in the community. There happens to be an age gap between 30 and 40 within this region. There just aren't the people here because they're leaving for employment elsewhere. The members of RAPIT believe that we can develop decent jobs here without fouling up the environment. We can do it in a manner, we are an intelligent people here. There's an awful lot of smart people in our community. We can avoid the pitfalls that perhaps have plagued other areas. We can do it in a manner that brings benefit to everybody. One of the advantages, obviously, to having a healthy port and a railroad, particularly for the Harbor District, is that it will have more revenue coming in to finance the goals of conservation and recreation. The materials that are on the tables, I hope you'll pick those up. There's quite a bit of information there. And if you haven't got it, just feel free to wander back there and pick some up off the tables. And if you have any questions, by the way, are the cards passed out for handing in questions? If you does anybody need any cards? Okay. I should also explain that RAPIT, R-A-P-I-T, the Rail and Port Infrastructure Task Force, is made up primarily of organized labor. It's a coalition of organized labor, business, and environmentalists. And it's been working now for 4 years. There were other organizations before, but RAPIT is a somewhat new organization. And we hope by the convergence of events that created opportunities here, like the congestion at ports elsewhere along the West Coast, the fact that the Harbor District now has a dock, whereas before, prior to 2004, there was no real maritime type dock owned by the Harbor District. Now there is. The opportunities are in front of us. And I think if we have a full, if we explore the facts and the challenges, we can do it right. And I think we owe it to our children and grandchildren to do so. I'd like to thank a number of people for helping put this on tonight, and for the overall effort over the years. Brian Plumley, and Pete Oringer, Sid Berg, Dave Borgeson, Kay Strickland. I want to thank all of you, and all of those that I haven't mentioned. This is our first RAPIT forum, and we plan to have more, because I think we're not going to have all the answers. We're not going to, we're not making decisions tonight. But this is a public forum to provide information and to try to find the questions that need to be asked and try to answer as many as we can. I would also like to announce that RAPIT does now have a website, thanks to Larry LaBranche here, who is, your work is very much appreciated, Larry. The new website for RAPIT is HumboldtGreenport.org, if you want to write it down, HumboldtGreenport.org. And that is, it's all run on, right, Larry? Run together. HumboldtGreenport.org. There are a couple of postings that are on there already that you're encouraged to look at. One of them is the Shannon Wilson report that was prepared for the North Coast Railroad Authority back in 1999 on the cost of restoring the railroad. Unfortunately, that report has been pretty much ignored by many people, even consultants. But it was done, and it contains quite a bit of information. It's a pretty thorough report. It's not the FEMA report that estimated a cost of repair of about $600 million. The Shannon Wilson report estimated a cost of just getting the place up and running at about $72 million. That's 9 years ago. It would probably now be twice that. And if anybody does, if the railroad ever does get restored, it could well cost quite a bit more than that. But it's a report worth looking at, because it really hasn't received the consideration it needs. And with that, I think, oh, yes, Pete and Maggie, if you could maybe come up to the table pretty soon and yeah, Pete?
They work up there.
I think this was the table we're going to use up here to sort through the questions. Maybe not, I don't know. And by the way, we're kind of winging it tonight, so be patient with us. And we thank you. As some of you probably are already aware, RAPIT is not a real formal, it functions, and it's been meeting now for nearly 4 years, but we're not, anyway, we do encourage your participation tonight. We hope that all of this discussion over the years, which, I imagine there'll be some discussion over the next few years, that we try to maintain a civil level of discourse. It's I think it will be very helpful. Information is exchanged more thoroughly then, and I think we can accomplish quite a bit. Again, I think we should proceed, and Dave Hull from the Harbor District will assume the podium, and we'll proceed with his presentation. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill. So, how's that? I'm going to step a little bit over here so I can kind of look at the screen while I'm doing this. The RAPIT folks asked me to come by and talk a little bit about the Port of Humboldt Bay and the Redwood Marine Terminal project, just to kind of get everybody on the same page. I know a lot of you have seen, in previous forums, you've seen the Redwood Marine Terminal stuff. This is every time it gets a little bit better, I think, because we pick up some questions, we try to answer them in the future discussions we have. Like I said, I'd like to start off with just a kind of a snapshot of the Port of Humboldt Bay, just what it's like, what we're doing today. Port of Humboldt Bay is one of these things that sometimes needs to be explained. What is that exactly? Well, it's a kind of a couple of things, really. It's the harbor portion of Humboldt Bay, and that really extends from the Samoa Bridge south to the Fields Landing, the end of the Fields Landing Channel. It's also, the Port of Humboldt Bay is also the name that we have for our port division of the Humboldt Bay Harbor, Recreation, and Conservation District. So we do a number of different things. The harbor portion, though, really falls under our division we call the Port of Humboldt Bay. Of course, the Humboldt Bay Harbor, Recreation, and Conservation District was formed back in 1970 by an act of the state legislature. As I've said in some other groups, we are the only harbor, recreation, and conservation district that's in the Harbors and Navigation Code, the port districts, harbor districts. We're the only harbor, recreation, and conservation. It's because people in forums like this back in the late 60s decided they wanted to have a nice balanced port district here that covered a number of different issues. So hence we're the only one of those in the state. It was set up, as I kind of referenced just a second ago, to balance the promotion of commerce, fisheries, navigation, recreation, and the protection of natural resources in Humboldt Bay. Like I said, that's in Appendix 2 of the Harbors and Navigation Code. Now I want to lift out one section here, since we're talking about harbor stuff tonight, and I'd be happy to talk at some other venue about our recreation and conservation stuff we do, because we do a lot of that also. But tonight's a harbor discussion, so I want to focus kind of on the harbor issues. But in paragraph 4 of that Harbors and Navigation Code is our district powers and authority. And I want to just touch on a couple of things here, just to give you a flavor of what the district was really formed for, what the state of California said the Port of Humboldt Bay should do, what the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District should do. It was for the acquisition, construction, maintenance, operation, development, and regulation of harbor works and improvements, including rail, water, air terminal facilities for the regulation and management of Humboldt Bay. So that's a lot of stuff in there that sounds really port related and not so much recreation or conservation related. That almost sounds like a public works kind of an organization. So that's clearly in our authority to do harbor development kind of projects. A little further down, you can see the other highlighted part is that we actually were established for, as I mentioned before, for the promotion of national and international commerce, navigation, fisheries, and recreation, and for the development and protection of natural resources. So there's that balance that, again, the community came up with some time ago. Now, so that just for reference point, here's the Samoa Bridge up here, the Fields Landing. The Fields Landing Channel is about right there. So really, we're only talking about this piece of the bay as being the port area. Now, let me give you just sort of a snapshot of what we've got, parts and pieces that make up the Port of Humboldt Bay. For transportation leaks, we have the deepwater channels. We had a deepening project back in 1999 and 2000. The entrance is at minus 48 feet after that project. The shipping channels in the North Bay are at minus 38 feet, and the Fields Landing Channel is actually at minus 26 feet. There's 8 shipping docks, some active, some inactive. There's highways, as you know. 101 is the north-south connector highway-wise. As far as some reports that we've had done, say the east-west connections are Highway 199 and, of course, 299. Railroad, the Northwestern Pacific Railroad, of course, is in existence. It's administered by the Northwest Railroad Authority, inactive right now, but it still belongs to the state. The state still has a joint powers authority. You're going to hear some about that in a little bit. And, of course, we have the air service at the Eureka Arcade Airport. So we've got transportation leaks to and from the port. Some of them need work, some of them need a lot of work, but they all exist. This is just, again, a little graphic. The 48-foot section of the channel comes to about here. This is all 38 feet, goes up here to the Samoa Bridge, and then the Fields Landing Channel down here is at minus 26 feet. This shows basically terminal areas that are on Humboldt Bay. The docks that we have are in this area out on the Spit. There's a little section on the city of Eureka side that's their coastal dependent industrial area, and then a little section down here at the end of the Fields Landing Channel. Just what does that look like? Well, here in the Spit, you've all seen this. This is the Redwood Marine Terminal here, and then down here at Fairhaven Terminal. So it's really this section right here is all we have there. This is the bay's entrance right here. Fields Landing Channel, the entrance to the bay is about up here, so it comes right down. There's Humboldt Bay Forest Products, the old Eureka Fisheries Dock, and then this is the Harbor District's Fields Landing Terminal down here at the end of the Fields Landing Channel. That's where we have our boat yard right now. The railroad we mentioned, the other transportation links, the North Coast Railroad Authority, the Northwestern Pacific Railroad, is about a 300-mile long short line. You can hear more about that, but it basically starts at Fairhaven over here and wraps around North Bay and goes clear down to the Bay Area to a place called Lombard as it heads east to eventually connect up with the national rail system. The current port activity, right now, there's about 500,000 to 900,000, depending on the year, somewhere in that range, tons per year of import and export cargo that goes through the port of Humboldt Bay. The import commodities include logs and gasoline and diesel, and the export commodities include paper pulp and wood chips. This is a kind of a typical wood pulp freighter that docks at Fairhaven Terminal. We've had cruise ships in here, as you know. This is actually at Redwood Marine Terminal. And there's chip export kind of facility. The available property that's along here, as many of you recall, we did a joint study back in 2002 and 2003 with the city of Eureka and the county of Humboldt called the Harbor Revitalization Plan. One of the things it concluded is that there's approximately 1,000 acres of underutilized waterfront commercial and water-dependent industrial land that's available in that section I mentioned on the map there, and about 40 million gallons per day of industrial water that's also available that doesn't get talked about too much, but is still there. So these are the underutilized properties that basically came out of that map. Pretty much the same places that you saw on that other map of where the terminals actually exist. The available workforce that's here, we pretty much have a small but a complete set of workforce available. Of course, we have longshoremen that are here. We have bar pilots. Coast Guard has a huge presence here. We have a customs office, Homeland Security office, tugs, stevedores. We pretty much got the full complement of port services that are still here and still available. We have some available economic incentives that are available. Thanks to the city of Eureka, we have a foreign trade zone that is actually part of one of the pieces of the foreign trade zone is on Redwood Marine Terminal. And of course, we have an enterprise zone, also as a tax incentive. Just in summary then, about the port, the data shows that Port Humboldt Bay could contribute to the improvement of California's goods movement ability. And that's because we have all these things that are here. We have deep channels that are appropriate for the fleet that's out there right now. We have underutilized water-dependent property. We have shipping docks. We have skilled workforce, the tax incentives. And of course, we have the necessary transportation links, albeit some of them need a lot of work, and the rail's out of service right now. So that's kind of the snapshot of where we are with the Port of Humboldt Bay. Now let me move to the Redwood Marine Terminal, just to tie this up before we move on. Of course, the Redwood Marine Terminal Modernization Project, this was a piece of property that the district acquired back in 2004 and 2006 as part of some lease termination negotiations one with Louisiana Pacific and one with Simpson Timber. The purpose that the district got that piece of property back and has been pursuing the path that it's on right now is to diversify local shipping opportunities, increase the utilization of the Port of Humboldt Bay, increase the opportunity for future local employment, and contribute to the economic vitality of the region. The Redwood Marine Terminal, of course, most of you are familiar with this now, but it's actually this kind of turquoise area that's up here. That actually includes this piece right up here too, which is a dredge disposal site the district has picked up as part of that. Again, same picture, but it basically follows along here. This is what we call berth 2, which is down here right off of the pulp mill. That's a part of the Redwood Marine Terminal. This is berth 1, which is right along the kind of the northern edge of it. The roundhouse and some of the historic structures are right here. The small cookhouse is right here, just for reference. Okay, so what do we do with the property? The district acquired the property, like I said, in 2004 and 2006. Do we turn around and lease it? The board decided we had to control our own destiny a little bit and try to diversify those commodities, as I mentioned, to get some economic stability out of it. In October, the district approached the Headwaters Fund Board and for a $200,000 grant to initiate a feasibility study and business plan to figure out what to do with the property. keeping with the zoning that's out there and the goals that the board had established. The grant fund, and the thing that's in italics here, let me just read it real quick. This is actually what we asked Headwaters for. This is right out of the contract with it. It was to prepare a feasibility study business plan for the modernization of the Redwood Marine Terminal for the purpose of identifying the two most feasible options for upgrading the existing facility to support maritime uses. And the maritime uses that were identified in the contract, they include container shipping, container transfer capabilities, container barging, break bulk, ship loading and unloading, and cruise ships. And so in April 2007, we did get the money from the county. In April 2007, the district retained Trans-Systems, a national transportation planning and engineering firm, to do the project. So the feasibility study was the first piece of that, as I mentioned. On December 6, 2007, Trans-Systems presented their draft feasibility study to the Board of Commissioners and a large group of folks. They basically came up with two options for the development of the Redwood Marine Terminal. One was a standalone multi-purpose dock. The other one, what they call option B, was the same thing, the same multi-purpose dock, but it allowed for flexibility to expand to include additional cargo handling facilities if the railroad came back. So after a 50-day public comment period on that feasibility study and about 150 comments received, we sent those down to the consultant. The consultant reviewed them, revised the report, and on February 28, 2008, the Board of Commissioners of the Harbor District received and filed the report and directed Trans-Systems to go ahead and prepare a business plan around development option B. So development option B, what are those pieces that I mentioned in there? There's three kind of ship-related sorts of parts to that. You see up here that they recommended cruise ships, local bulk and project cargo, and container on barge. They also recommended three different kinds of non-cargo activities that would be consistent with the property down there. One of them was developing historical attractions, including aquaculture, some upland mariculture support facilities, and continuing to use some of the warehouses and storage areas for fishing gear storage and the like. The multi-purpose berth, this is just sort of a conceptual picture, looks like this. Basically what they did is they continued to keep the cargo handling ability in the middle of the property. This is really where the old dock is right now, where Barge 1 is right now. You can see they basically laid the new dock, this blue area, over the old dock. Not literally, but on a plan level. It's in the same footprint, when we put it like that. These, the red areas and this blue area are the non-cargo activities. So we kind of have, in general sense, we got non-cargo activities on the tails of the property, cargo in the center of the property. Right in this area, though, there's where the Samoa shops are, is where they thought the historic museum ought to go, and those attractions. Now, in the long-term expansion, they thought that was dependent on West Coast market trends and, again, getting the rail back here. What they looked at there was the possibility that we could be another West Coast container gateway. They thought this might be a place to import cars. Again, this is all dependent on rail kinds of things, or a short sea shipping kind of project, which is sort of like the container barges, only it's a bigger, broader thing. Actually, you can see here it actually uses vessels that move this more of a coastwise ferry kind of system. This is a longer process, of course. They thought this was a 10-year process to get to the long-term expansion, and this is what one of their conceptual drawings of what the container version of that facility build-out might look like. Notice the dock is bigger, of course, but it's in the same location again as pretty much the existing one. Same kind of idea. Cargo is located in the center. Non-cargo activities both north and south of the cargo activities. So on the business plan then, after the feasibility study, remember the board directed them to go ahead and pursue developing a business plan around option B. They presented that business plan, a draft business plan, to the board on June 26, just a couple months ago. That started a 64-day comment period that I think a lot of you have been making comments. We've had by the end of August, next Thursday actually is the end of the comment period. By the end of August, we will actually have had 5 public meetings, 5 Harbor District public meetings that we've taken comments at from that. The draft business plan has several recommendations in it. Just generally, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but let me just hit some of them. They recommend that the district functions as a landlord port as opposed to being an operating port. So in either option, we're actually going to have some lessee actually run the facility. They think that our staff that we have currently in the Harbor District is sufficient for at least the initial development of either the multi-purpose berth or the larger one. They think the funding sources are driven by the development of the phase. So in a multi-purpose berth, they think revenue bonds for the terminal infrastructure, this is the cargo part of it, this is in the center of the facility down there. The non-cargo uses would be primarily funded by the tenants. So if there was a mariculture operation, the mariculture operators would be the one that would fund those improvements to the property. In the long-term expansion, they were looking at private sector investment all the way. And one of the mechanisms they were looking at was this design, build, finance, operate finance structure. And that's kind of the Goldman Sachs, if you will, method that we're contemplating right now. So basically, the Trans-Systems said at the end of the business plan, the draft business plan, they said, this is what we think the Harbor District ought to do. This is the recommendation that's on the table. They think the Harbor District ought to pursue both at the same time, a parallel path, do both a multi-purpose berth using the revenue bonds and long-term expansion using the private sector investment. And again, the district, we talked about Goldman Sachs a little bit, you've heard a lot about it. This is kind of where this fits, is under the long-term expansion. And I think that's why Trans-Systems included this as one of the things to pursue, is because there is the interest in the market out there right now. Where we are in that project is, you remember that Goldman Sachs the Harbor District got an unsolicited proposal from Goldman Sachs back on May 22nd, I think, yeah, May 22nd. And what they wanted to do is they proposed that they would act as the district's financial advisor to package both the Redwood Marine Terminal and the railroad and go out to the private sector funding and see if they could market the property for us. Those negotiations just on that engagement agreement are still ongoing. So we haven't gone anywhere beyond just sitting down to talk and try to work out an agreement with Goldman Sachs. So and I got a couple things, these things I picked up over some of the talks I've given to just clear up a little bit of the confusion. Today, the district is compliant with the California Environmental Quality Act, the CEQA, regarding the Redwood Marine Terminal feasibility study and business plan. The district can only lease Redwood Marine Terminal trust property. We can't sell it. That's very specific in our enabling legislation. The state set up trust property belongs to everybody, to the people, and it stays that way. We can't lease it for what can be a long period of time, but we can't ever sell it. No dredging is proposed for this project except for dredging at the dock face. We've done some navigation studies, and Trans-Systems reviewed those and decided that the 38-foot channel that's in the Samoa Channel that's adjacent to the Redwood Marine Terminal dock area is sufficient for any of the shipping they can have in the foreseeable future. But between the dock and the channel is going to need to be deep in maybe 3 or 4 feet just to catch up and be the same as what's there. So that's the only dredging that's proposed. You've heard a lot of people say we're going to go to 50 feet everywhere, and that's not true. The proposed non-used cargo uses remain in the multi-purpose and long-term expansion. So if we move to the long-term expansion, the rail comes back, it doesn't mean that the aquaculture is going away, that the Timber Heritage Museum is going away. Those things all stay. As far as the draft is going, Trans-Systems is not saying we have to move any of those uses around. So just as far as next steps go, just to wrap up here, the 60-day comment period for written and oral comments on the draft business plan ends, like I said, next Thursday. So August 28th, at our board meeting. At the end of our board meeting, that's the end of the comment period for the draft business plan. What we'll do is we're going to handle it like we did with the feasibility study. We'll then, on August 29th, we'll package up all these comments and ship them off to Trans-Systems folks. They'll analyze them, and then they'll go ahead and revise the report as necessary. When they're done with that, they'll resubmit a final draft business plan to the district. The district at that point can consider receiving and filing it, and initiating the CEQA process, which initiating the CEQA process will also include probably a 5 or 10% design contract, so that we know what the impacts are going to be based on the design, so we can do an adequate job with the CEQA document. And there you go. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Dave. And Dave's going to be around here to answer questions too. And at this point, I'm going to introduce Dan Hauser, but so we get a perspective on the railroad. Dan's going to talk about the railroad, but Pete, go ahead.
There's a lot of seats up here. Why don't some of you come forward and utilize these seats?
There's 2 in the front row, 4 over here.
And there's a dozen more in here. So come on up and harvest those seats. And if you filled out your question card, pass it to the end of the row, the north and the south sides, and we'll collect it from you. So if you filled it out, hold it up now, or pass it off to the side, and we'll collect it from you. And for those of you that choose to hand in their cards this evening, you can give it to Mary Ann or one of us, and we'll save you 42 cents. And if you hand it in quickly, it'll stay 42 cents and won't go up any more than that. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Pete, but don't go away, Pete, because you're going to precede Dan Hauser. Pete's going to read a letter regarding the railroad from the chairman of the North Coast Railroad Authority. But I wanted to explain to those of you who don't know who Dan Hauser is. Dan and his wife Donna live in the city of Arcata. He's a graduate of Humboldt State University. Beginning after the '64 floods in Humboldt County, he worked as an insurance claims adjuster for 17 years. He served 2 terms on the Arcata City Council from 1974 to 1982. I think I met Dan in 1977. From 1978 to 1982, he was mayor of Arcata, and he was elected to the California legislature in 1982, representing the 1st Assembly District, which includes Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, Mendocino, and Sonoma counties. Dan served a total of 14 years in the Assembly until he was termed out in 1996. For 9 years, he chaired the Committee on Housing and Community Development. And during his state assembly career, Mr. Hauser had a total of 306 pieces of legislation signed into law. Following his service in the California legislature, Dan was executive director of the North Coast Railroad Authority and general manager of the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. For the last 5.5 years before his retirement in 2006, he was city manager for the city of Arcata. And I'd like to add one thing. Dan was the mayor during the what a lot of us old-timers call the sewer wars. And if it weren't for Dan's leadership, the Arcata Marsh Project, which is a world-acclaimed project, and clearly one of the first green projects ever to take place in Humboldt County. And it's an alternative sewer treatment type of system using, I guess you'd call it low-tech technology. And had Dan not shepherded the whole effort, that would not take place. And the reason I mention this is that we're talking about doing a green port and a green railroad, and it can be done. Because of the alliance that developed back in 1977 and 78 between organized labor, business community, and the environmental community, the Arcata Marsh Project actually was realized. It came to being. It was I don't think it might not have been the first time there was an alliance between the environmental community and the business community and organized labor, but it was certainly an effective alliance. And we're hoping that same type, and we intend to have that same type of alliance bring about a green port and a green railroad. Humboldt County has led the way in many ways with the Arcata Community Forest. I think we can lead and the Arcata Marsh. I think we can lead the way too with the green port and the green railroad. And now, before I let Dan come to the microphone, I'd like to have Pete give a little background on the North Coast Railroad Authority by reading a letter from Alan Hemphill, the chairman of the board.
Can everyone hear okay? That's often a problem in these forums because of the variety of mics we have and how we do it. And you almost have to chew on this mic for it to be effective. This letter, as Bill related to you, is from Alan Hemphill, who has been on the North Coast Railroad for many years, and I believe from its inception, but if not that, close to it. And it is addressed specifically for you at this forum. And it starts off, on behalf of the North Coast Railroad Authority Board of Directors, I want to thank RAPIT for its sponsoring of the Port Revitalization Forum, and it's for its long-standing support for the restoration of rail service on the Northwestern Pacific rail line. As you know, the NCRA has a mandate to restore rail service over the entire 316-mile length of the Northwestern Pacific line, and that's from Lombard to Samoa. Repairs are currently underway on the Russian division, which is Lombard to Willits section of that 316-mile railroad, with the expectations that operations will commence following the settlement of the Novato lawsuit. Second point, certification of the Russian River Division Environmental Impact Report. And the final point is the completion of the bridge and trackway repairs. He goes on to say, the NCRA will proceed with plans to restore rail service through the Eel River Canyon when the following issues are fully addressed. And Chairman Hemphill lists the three bullet points that need to be addressed before that is implemented. They start off, a rail plan is developed by the operator, who is NWP Company, which identifies freight volume sufficient to justify the costs of repairs and maintenance of the NWP line through the Eel River Canyon. His second bullet point, the funds necessary to repair the NWP line to at least Class 2, which is 25 miles an hour for freight, through the Eel River Canyon have been identified and secured. So when those funds are secured, that's one of the criteria. And the third criteria that is listed as a bullet point, an environmental impact report that evaluates the cost to repairs and operate trains and evaluates the environmental impact of such repairs and operations through the Eel River Canyon is prepared and certified by the NCRA Board of Directors. So those are the three criteria. It goes on to say in the summation paragraph, the return of trains to the North Coast is good for the environment, good energy policy, and good for the local economy. Thanks again for your long-standing support for transportation solutions that will benefit the entire region. And it is signed, Alan Hemphill, Chairman, North Coast Rail Authority. Now, just as a minor amount of history here, back in 2000 and 2001, there was a proposal that all the funds should go to support the lower portion of the 300-mile section of track. A discussion ensued, initiated by those on the North Coast here, I might add, that we need to be assured that the entire 300-odd miles of line is fully addressed in repairing and bringing it up into serviceability. After about a year, a compromise isn't quite the right term, but a decision was made public that addressed that the entire line will be dealt with and has to be dealt with for the benefit of all the people along the 300 miles of track. Well, events occurred that mandated that the funds only be used initially on the Willits South sections of the line. But that is temporarily being applied until that section is brought up to operational status, and then the northern section of the line will be addressed. And we hope that the benefits will accrue to the entire 300 miles of line and to other projects that are occurring and are planned to occur along the line. And everyone agrees that it has to be done with full diligence to what's necessary to ensure environmental standards that I think most, if not every one of us in this room want to see as the standard by which it is done. And now, Mr. Hauser, as we have to say in the biography, most of you don't know him as Mr. It's Dan. Let's hear from him.
Thanks, Pete. It's interesting that we were each asked to give a 5-minute presentation, and unfortunately, Pete and Bill have used up 15 minutes of my time. Anyway, we'll try to get us back on point and on time, so we'll do have some time for some questions. I was asked to speak about the North Coast Railroad Authority and the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. And while I don't know all of the facts associated with the railroad, I am fairly familiar with a lot of what's going on and what's going on presently. First of all, there are a number of myths that I would like to address. The first myth is that the Northwestern Pacific Railroad closed down in 1998 because of the geology and geologic conditions in the Eel River Canyon. That is absolute bunk. It closed down because of major flooding and washouts in Marin and Sonoma County in early February of 1998. We were still operating trains in the canyon in February of 1998. Unfortunately, though, being a railroad, there was nowhere to go when the southern end was closed down. The highways were damaged, the railroad was badly damaged, and we could not, at that time, really promote reloading in Willits or Healdsburg, so reloading of lumber cargo. So we were with no money coming in, we were unable to continue to maintain the line, and eventually we did suffer from damage from slip-outs, eventually slides, but we had done tremendous amount of preventative maintenance during the summer of 1997. That preventative maintenance paid off. If that preventative maintenance had been allowed to continue, we wouldn't have had the closures in the Eel River Canyon. Myth number 2, the investment to restore the railroad's too great. Often quoted the Parker Brinkerhouse report, which was prepared for FEMA. That particular report calls for full and complete stabilization of the entire Eel River Canyon. I would argue that if we tried to do complete total stabilization of Highway 101, we couldn't afford to reopen that either. The report that Bill mentioned, the Shannon-Wilson geotechnical report, indicates approximately $71 million in 1998 dollars, which certainly has increased since then, but is still a much more reasonable and realistic repair cost. Myth number 3. The North Coast Railroad Authority has to make a profit. Now that's absolutely bunk. It is a publicly owned infrastructure. It doesn't have to make a profit any more than the railroad, than the port has to make a profit, the airport has to make a profit, or Highway 101 has to make a profit. Now the operator has to make a profit to stay in business. The operator has to make enough of a profit to maintain the line. But the original investment is a public investment made by Bond Act, by the state of California. And then myth number four, it'd be easy to simply walk away from the rail line through the Eel River Canyon. Again, because this is publicly owned, it is a state responsibility to remove the structure. If it's abandoned, formally abandoned, it would be the expense of the people of the state of California to remove the structures and rebuild the landforms. I would argue that doing that is as expensive, if not more so, than restoring the line. Some critics would argue, leave the structures in place and we'll turn it into a trail. That assumes you've got an agency who will maintain those structures as a trail. Right now, there's no agency that's shown any willingness to come forward or have any ability to come forward to continue to maintain those structures. If those structures are not maintained, they're going to wind up in the Eel River. They're not going to dissolve and go away. They're going to create major problems in the Eel River. It's better environmentally and it's better economically to repair the line, restore service to the North Coast. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Eric Zampool, Associate at Goldman Sachs, to address the group here tonight. Mr. Zampool is an associate in the firm's public sector and infrastructure banking group, and he has over 6 years of experience focusing on infrastructure clients wishing to explore public-private partnerships and other unique mechanisms to fund capital needs. Many of the prominent public sector infrastructure clients include the state of California, the Port of Oakland, San Diego Unified Port District, Port of Seattle, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, and the city of Reno. His experience also includes working with the Department of Transportation's TIFIA program and working directly with the Goldman Sachs Institutional Infrastructure Partners, LP, the firm's independent fund seeking to make investment in select infrastructure assets. His prominent advisory assignments for the fund include valuation and due diligence services on the acquisition of a minority stake in Terex, Inc., an international vertically integrated entity with a focus on marine terminal operations. He majored in economics and graduated with honors from Dartmouth College. And it's, we want to welcome you to this community. We got to tell you that the announcement by Goldman Sachs that you were interested in the Port of Humboldt in our region did inspire some degree of optimism in the community. And we want to thank you. No matter what happens with the Harbor District and the negotiations, we are very appreciative of the interest you've shown, and we encourage you to become involved in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for that very generous introduction. As he mentioned, I've been with Goldman Sachs for over 6 years, and I work primarily in the maritime space. Goldman Sachs performs a variety of functions. We do both revenue bond financings. For instance, for the Port of Seattle, we did the T-18 project financing as well as the Terminal 30 financing. And then we also specialize in public-private partnerships. Ultimately, our goal in working with the district is to develop a plan of finance that delivers a terminal operator as well as a fully functioning terminal to the district and to the community at the lowest cost possible. And whether that involves a public-private partnership or whether that involves a revenue bond financing is something that we'll continue to discuss. But on a preliminary basis, we think that a public-private partnership might be the best way to proceed. In certain ways, the public-private partnership is no different than what ports all across the country have historically done, basically since their inception. And what I mean by that is, for instance, the Port of Oakland will operate as a landlord entity. It operates and owns a section of land. It's required to do so under the Tidelands Trust, as David mentioned earlier. And then it seeks out an operator. Because the port itself is not necessarily a core competency to operate a terminal, it will seek out this operator who takes on all the risk of operating the terminal. The operator is also brought in and is required to make a lease payment to the port. The port then generally utilizes those funds for a period of time to fund certain infrastructure improvements that the port wishes to see. I think ultimately what was required here is obviously a very large infrastructure investment, not only in the rail capacity, but also at the terminal site itself. And therefore, in this particular instance, a revenue bond approach might not be sufficient. You may need to seek out private equity, and whether or not Goldman Sachs' role is ultimately in terms of facilitating delivery of that private equity or facilitating and directly investing is something that I think that we'll continue to see. But ultimately, our goal is to serve the district in whatever function that the district so desires. And obviously, I hope we have some opportunity for some questions and answers later on this evening. This is not actually my first visit up here. I've come here a couple of times to do hiking. It's a great area, and we definitely look forward to hopefully facilitating this project, in the way that the district sees fit.
Thank you, Eric. Next, we'd like Mr. Tom Creamer, who is the Vice President of Ports America in the area of sales and contracts, General Stevedoring Division. Mr. Creamer has over 25 years of maritime industry experience, which include operations and sales management roles with both asset-based, that is carrier, and non-asset-based roles. Prior to joining Ports America, Mr. Creamer was General Manager for International Intermodal Express at APL Logistics. Other management and operation assignments include FedEx Trade Networks and Freight Solutions International, Direct Container Line, and Sealand and Hanjin. All those names, I think those of us in this region may become more familiar with that in the coming years. And again, thank you for coming up here. We're honored.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. The first thing is the name's Kramer. It's spelled Kramer.
Oh,
But it's Kramer. My dad will do that. I've been doing that since the first grade, so no problem. My brothers and I all do that. It's just a burden you get, Basically, I've been in the freight business or ocean transportation business for about 28 years. I work for what is known now as Ports America Corporation. Let me start with giving you a little bit of history of that, but as Eric was talking about the terminal operator, that would be us. We operate terminals throughout the United States. Basically, the history of and what I do for the company, I'm the Vice President of Sales and Contracts for what we call the General Stevedoring Division. What we mean by General Stevedoring is the break bulk cargo, the ro-ro ships, the auto ships, some bulk cargo, and we do operate some container facilities, basically. Terminal 6 in Portland, which is a very large facility, and under our division we also operate the TBCT terminal in Oakland. Okay. Most of our other container terminals that the company operates are joint venture entities with the carrier themselves. A lot of those company names that he spoke about are basically ocean line or ocean carriers. But let me kind of explain what the Ports America story is. Basically, back in July of last year, on the 5th, we merged with a company called, used to be known as P&O Ports, which offered services from up and down the East Coast all the way to Houston. Our company used to be known as Marine Terminals Corporation, a privately held company for 75 years based out of San Francisco, and the largest stevedoring operation on the West Coast. These two companies came together and have been rebranded as Ports America. That makes us basically the first nationwide stevedoring or terminal operating company in the United States. We have about 1,500 management or non-union employees On any given day, we will employ up to 10,000 additional longshore labor, and we estimate that we have about a 25% market share on the stevedoring or terminal operating side. Okay. What that does is it gives us a lot of flexibility as far as access to capital and growth, which the second biggest cost factor we face as a terminal operator, besides labor, is equipment. We operate a lot of terminals in the Los Angeles area, and with the new CARB or environmental regulations coming on board, we have to replace a lot of our equipment, and equipment these days is extremely expensive. Okay. The other thing that it gives us as an operator is access to the customer base. A lot of the shipping lines these days are not U.S. based. They're based in Asia or they're based in Europe. And these are the customers that we're talking about, hopefully attracting to Humboldt. And they like to deal with one entity and have one quality standard. And so with that, as Ports America, the brand now, is we hope to market ourselves in that fashion. Okay. Beyond that, I'd like to answer, of course, any questions that come across, but very pleased to be invited here this evening, and thank you very much.
By the way, before I forget, these green cards you may have found on your chair, if you support the effort that's underway to revitalize our port, if you could fill this out and turn it in tonight to the people in the back of the room, we would be most appreciative. And Mr. Kramer, sorry for the mispronunciation of your name, but I think one of the questions you're going to end up with tonight, just so you can prepare yourself, is the question of air quality. And maybe some of the other panel members would be thinking about that. I know that there was from what I've read in the marine business journals recently, or in some other business articles, business news articles, there was a international sort of a treaty signed in July by the United States that does bear upon air quality for ships. Maybe somebody could explain that later on tonight. And also California has implemented some air quality rules regarding ocean commerce. Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Glenn Yamaguchi, who's the Executive Vice President of the Pasha Group and General Counsel based in Corte Madera. His practice specializes in maritime transportation, taxes, and insurance. He holds a law degree from Bolt Law School in Berkeley, and we're very honored for him to be here today. And, thank you for coming.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Yamaguchi, and I'm Executive Vice President of the Pasha Group. And unlike some of the panel members, I don't have a presentation. I was basically invited up on this particular day to take a look at some terminal facilities to evaluate whether we'd be interested in developing and operating some of these facilities. So I had a chance to come here actually for the very first time. I've never been in Eureka before. So it's very enlightening and then also interesting to find out a lot of the information that's available to the public regarding development of the railroad and of the port facilities. First, let me explain to you who the Pasha Group is. It's a privately held company. We're based in San Francisco. Our main lines of businesses are freight forwarding for household goods internationally. We handle a lot of household goods, used household goods for the U.S. military, and handle shipping throughout the world for military personnel. Our second division is our marine terminal operations, and we handle both break bulk cargo and automobile cargoes. Our automobile facilities in San Diego and our steel cargo handling facilities in Port of Los Angeles. And just to give you an indication of size, We handle about 3 million tons of steel through the Port of Los Angeles and about 300,000 cars through the Port of San Diego. We also handle other rail facilities for handling automobiles, inland port facilities throughout various parts of the U.S. The third major division for the company is a relatively new one. It's the PHTL division, and it stands for Asia Hawaii Transport Lines. And that venture, which we own 75% of, engaged in the construction of a Jones Act vessel. And for those of you who don't understand what a Jones Act vessel is, it is a vessel that has been built in the United States at a U.S. shipyard, is built with U.S. material, is operated by U.S. seamen, and handles cargo within the United States and its territories. So it goes, basically our ship goes from California to Hawaii. And we are a specialized ro-ro carrier. We handle, ro-ro means roll on, roll off. We have ramps on the ship that come down and land on the dock. And we basically drive the cargo on and off the vessel. And the size of our vessel, we can handle up to 4,000 vehicles on one shipment. The uniqueness of the ro-ro vessel is that we were the first to build a ro-ro vessel for the U.S. fleet. And because of that, we built in the multi-deck, adjustable deck capability into the vessel. So 2 of our decks can move the upper ceiling of the deck, and therefore allow the heavy, high, and wide type cargo to transit on this vessel. And we can handle shipments such as tractors, buses, heavy-duty trucks, military equipment, if necessary. It's qualified to handle tanks, and can be put into U.S. military service if needed. And so that's basically the patient group, and we're very interested in seeing what can be done here. We're especially interested in the railroad infrastructure, because we think that's one of the most important facilities that need to be in place to attract international cargo, especially automobiles. So the faster you can develop that type of capability, and I think the other types of infrastructure needs can be put into place very easily. Usually the most difficult is the railroad side of it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, and later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Last member of the panel that will be, well, actually I've got 3 more, but there's only room for 1 more up here at the table. The other presenters could be Ted Kuiper, CEO of Kuiper Mariculture, Greg Dale, Operations Manager of Coast Seafoods, and John Frederick, former District 3 Harbor Commissioner. But if it's, I know it's okay with John if he just sticks around. So either Ted or Greg, if you would now come forward to, who wants to talk? Okay. And then after this, we will take questions. I'll be reading the questions from the that you've submitted. And I didn't mention this earlier on, but we're hoping to get out of here by 7:30. That if it goes over, please be patient. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me okay? I'm your token oyster farmer. One thing you feel pretty stupid sitting up at the table with a bunch of people like this.
I'm here to just kind of give you a brief overview of the oyster industry and the fact that we all feel, I believe that Ted and I are in agreement that we all can coexist in some sort of reasonable fashion. The oyster industry, the shipping industry, the rail, the port, manufacturing industries. We all feel pretty strongly that with common sense, we can all make it together. So I'm going to talk today about our business. I've got a list here. I'm going to fly through this pretty fast because we all want to go home. Managed responsibly shellfish culture is pretty sustainable. It started with the Native Americans. It was shellfish on the west coast was pretty much wiped out during the gold rush. The native oyster on the west coast. The eastern oyster was brought in the late part of the 19th century. Didn't have a whole lot of success with it, although they tried for quite a while. Pacific oyster from Japan was brought into Humboldt Bay in 1955, and they had success with it, and it's been thriving here ever since. Today, this bay is considered one of the models for ecologically sound aquaculture in the country. We have some unique needs as an industry. We require clean water, and if it hadn't been for Mr. Hauser, we probably wouldn't still be in business. So we're all pretty grateful. One of the things that we do, and I think we do well as an industry and as a community, is we communicate. We work very well together to maintain and improve our water quality in Humboldt Bay. And I think that model could work very well for the discussion that's happening tonight. Water quality not only benefits the culture industry, it benefits fish and wildlife and public health. The culture industry here has been proven historically, been around for 50 years, actually over 100 years now, and it has done fairly well. I mean, there's times that it doesn't, times that it does, but by and large, we're here and we're going to try to stay here. We try and support our local economy as much as possible. A couple of years ago, I was at a meeting, and I said that we put, $2.5 million a year into the local economy as a business. And somebody stood up in the back of the room and said, the Moody outbreak was here for 9 months, and they put $9 million into our local economy. It kind of makes you feel small. And I never saw the movie either. We have, as an industry, between Ted, Todd, Scott, we employ over 100 people here. We purchase all of our goods and services locally in the community. We work to identify and solve water quality issues, and then obtain funding to affect that solution. Right now, we're working on the Marshall Intersector project. We pay taxes, and we do occasionally get some research funding. Thanks, Lee. And here's I do believe that we can all coexist as an industry, as a shellfish farmer. We've had pulp mills here. We've had shipping in and out of here. We have ships going by all the time outside. The train, when I first came to work here, the train used to run right down through the middle of Old Town. I used to ride on it in Arcata when I was going to school, from one end of town to the other. So I kind of miss the train. This one's kind of in here for nostalgic reasons, but if you look at the dark blue is Humboldt Bay, that's the production of oysters since the 60s. And then you look at the pink, which is the rest of California, you'll see that Humboldt Bay has remained fairly static, and the rest of California has grown. I think that pretty much describes our economy here. Primarily the oyster industry on the west coast, all around America, is small family-owned farms. We really don't differ here. I think the oyster industry needs the same things that the port and the rail and the shipping industry needs to grow or to survive. We need we just need to maintain our water quality from our standpoint, and I believe that the shipping industry feels the same way. We need wise, regulation, wise development. We need a stable regulatory environment. I believe that the port and the shipping industry need the same thing. And responsible and reasonable management and regulatory part. And we need community support, which I think is what we're here to do tonight. And that's all I have. I'll take any questions later on.
All right, thank you. I'd like to thank all the panelists for being courageous enough and willing to share their insights with us tonight. Now, at this point, we're going to present some questions to the panelists. They're going to stay in their at the table unless they really want to expand on their answer. They can come to this podium. But we do need more questions. We have. Do you have some there, Brian? Oh, hand them over to Brian if you'd like. But I think we're ready to start. So here's an opening question. Perhaps one of the panelists will be able to answer this. We have a turning basin here at Humboldt Bay, and with the size of the ships that would be coming in here, would the turning basin need to be enlarged for larger vessels with containers or large cruise ships? And I guess the companion question to that is how big and how deep are the vessels that would be coming into Humboldt Bay if we had a marine terminal? Who would like to answer that question?
Let me start with what we have, and then I'll pass it down and see if there's a match there. Our bar pilots recently, about a year ago, I guess now, did a long series, extensive series of navigation simulations to see exactly what was the biggest ship we could get in here. And honestly, the turning basin is really the constraint on that. But right now we have probably close to 700-foot ships that call at Fairhaven Terminal to do the pull. Through that research, under the weather conditions that they would normally go under, with those size ships, we can handle up to a 950-foot ship using the turning basin that we have. The draft at the Samoa Channel, as I mentioned in my talk, is 38 feet.
And by the way, is it correct? Is it correct that cruise ship vessels have a lower draft? I mean, a shallower draft than container ships?
Yes.
Okay.
38-foot draft should be sufficient to attract or to work most of the vessels in the Pacific. Now, it's not going to be sufficient to move the next generation of container ships, which are coming out at 12,000 to 14,000 TEU as we measure them, but there would be no need for them to come here. Those are going to be mega ships that are going into ports like Los Angeles, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Antwerp, places like that. As far as the bulk cargo and the ro-ro ships, 38 feet is sufficient, more than sufficient, as they are shallower draft than most of the very large container ships. You could not fit other ships of the size, on the bulk size, excuse me, which is Cape size and very large crude carriers. But you can fit what's called handy, Panamax and Supermax ships, which are like the starships in those classes that are here today. Hope that answers the question.
If you could hold on to the microphone for a moment, I think it might be helpful if you explain one of the terms that you use, TEU.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And what size are those, and how many are there?
TEU is a unit of measure used in the containerization or the container industry. TEU is 20-foot equivalent unit, and most of the boxes used in the containerized trade today are either 20-foot, 40-foot, or 45-foot containers. So the unit of measure that we use to measure volume is TEU. Most of the container capacity out there is 40-foot containers. And that's basically a truck, trailer, or near that size. So I hope that explains.
Thank you. And one more question. Sorry. is a 45-foot TEU container fit on a rail car?
On rail cars, you can fit all the equipment, 20, 40, 40-foot high cube, 45-foot. There are some 48-foot domestic trailers, a few of them on the oceans nowadays, and also 53-foot domestic equipment. So the rail has become quite versatile in the types of equipment that it can accommodate.
And do rails now handle double stack, or I don't even know the term?
Absolutely, it's all primarily double stack trains. The stuff that's going cross country, which this stuff is all different.
I'm going to be asking for volunteers on this question. Some of you have touched on this, but what could we look forward to seeing as being shipped in or shipped out? I guess first shipped in. If you've had a chance to think that question through, what kind of products, what kind of shipping it, and perhaps for some of the people in the community, in the audience, it might help if there was some definition given to the term break bulk, or to those terms. Any volunteers?
The Mike Hawk from Ports America will take that again.
Thank you.
Bulk shipping is used for a term that means anything you can pour, whether it be grain, whether it be iron ore, whether it be liquid. That would be bulk cargo. Break bulk cargo would be cargo that has to move in pieces, like windmill parts, steel coils. Anything that's lifted by a crane in pieces, it's break bulk. Okay? Those are the general divisions. The other major division, of course, is containerization, which moves the vast majority of cargo globally anymore. Although it has probably the largest share of cargo is moved by containers or in containers, there's still a very active bulk and break bulk market in the world globally and on the West Coast and all coasts of America. One of the largest growing commodities on the break bulk side or industry has been wind power. Maybe a lot of you have noticed the wind power farms coming online throughout the West. In the Midwest is the main. I think Texas is the state that leads in that, followed by California and then the Midwest. But these wind towers nowadays can stand 350 feet high, and the breadth of the blades are about 200 feet wide. Well, they come in on ships, and that's a very good example of break bulk cargo, because it has to go lifted off, very delicate cargo. It has to be lifted off with cranes, and then it's put on truck and trains and moved inland to the sites. So I hope that kind of explains the difference.
Thank you.
Sure.
One of the questions that I was given here is what could be shipped in? If you've had a chance to think about what could be shipped in, what could be shipped out? And I might throw in an additional question, additional twist on that. What happens when the dollar is weak? What happens when the dollar is strong? Does that affect it?
I guess this would be Goldman Sachs' turn. Or is it? And then I'll try and follow up with.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it. I think part of what the question is perhaps asking is, why this region? Why necessarily would this port be a good location? And the answer to that, I think, revolves around the fact that we do have deep water here. The fact that we are close to a major transportation network that includes both the highway infrastructure as well as the rail infrastructure once we get it back up and running again. And ultimately, there are locations in the world presently where you have absolutely almost zero local population that still function as intermodal gateways. And one of the most recent examples of that was the development of the Prince Rupert Port up in Canada. Prince Rupert has a population, I believe, of less than 5,000 people, and yet they are quickly developing under our contract with our terminals as one of the new emerging gateways for goods. And these goods are actually being shipped primarily down to the U.S. Sort of like central area, for instance, Chicago. And this includes everything from all of the products that our friend from Ports America just walked through, as well as the fact that there is also exports going out as well. And, the imports might include everything from, a t-shirt that you buy at Walmart that's made in China. And then the exports might include, everything that, from, U.S. manufactured goods all the way down to, U.S. agricultural products. And I think one of the unique things about this particular location, however, is its location and its proximity to the Central Valley. Oakland, for instance, right now does quite a bit of export based upon all of the ag products that are produced in the Central Valley. And I think that is a sector that Eureka could potentially compete with, especially as Oakland, I think, goes forward, continues to focus on intermodal good movements. And the final point that I would make is obviously that, there is a Trans Systems report on the web, the district's website. And Trans Systems, of course, was the advisor that was hired by the district. And they walk through a lot of the, manufacturing goods. They walk through a lot of the good types that would potentially be brought in, both in terms of break bulk as well as in terms of containers. So hopefully that's helpful. I think the bottom line, however, is that, we're obviously hopefully going to be able to emphasize the ability to move intermodal goods to the central U.S. as well as moving local goods, for instance, all of the paper products. Actually, one of the interesting things in the Trans System report, now that I think about it, is the fact that presently some of the wood products that are produced locally are actually being put in boxes and moved down to the Port of Oakland before being shipped out, or being put on trucks and moved up to the Port of Portland before being shipped out. So certainly those types of goods, it would make a lot more sense directly to put them on boats here, whether that be in the form of bulk or in the form of containers.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add to Eric's statements are that there's a growing need there's a growing need for additional terminal space on the west coast of North America. The Prince Rupert example is a perfect one because it was basically the end of the Canadian National Rail Line. Is a very inhospitable environment, but had two good things, space and deep water. And out of nothing has been built a very active container terminal, and as I've read recently, will also, I think potash exports will start to come out of there relatively soon, which is a bulk cargo. As far as what types of cargo, I think that's been relatively covered. But as far as the strength of the dollar and the exports, we are seeing an upsurge in exports from America, in particular to Asia. But still, the inbound volume far exceeds the export volume. Okay. The other point I'd like to mention, I think that railroad cargo or the automobiles is a very steady market. We, as a company, operate about a 35% market share on the West Coast. I see that market continuing to grow, and in the future, there's been talk about Chinese cars coming into the United States. The question is when. When will they be able to pass the environmental standards here in the U.S.? China is also currently manufacturing a lot of cars for their own domestic use, but also exporting to places like India and the Mideast. It's just a matter of time until Chinese cars enter the U.S. market, and that will look for a West Coast gateway, because the biggest auto market in America is California. It'll probably start there. So that's probably 2 to 5 years off.
Any other panelists? Okay, this is for Dan Hauser. How else can the route through the canyon be repaired without the train being brought back to speed to be able to repair the route as needed? Understand the question? Can you repair the track or the railroad without using the railroad? Yes.
The answer to that question, can you repair the railroad without the railroad? No, you cannot. You need the rail. Much of the Eureka Canyon is not reachable by roads of any kind, and would require the railroad to be able to repair the railroad. It's done in stages. You start at one end or both ends and work towards the middle. At the same time, just an impartial answer to the question, removal of a number of the structures also requires redoing the railroad to be able to get to those structures to remove them. which adds certainly to the cost and also the lodging.
So I actually, Dan, I would agree with you. We need to get the railroad repaired for all kinds of reasons. I think this question is for Dave. Port viability depends on constant dredging. Number one, is that true? Number two, constant dredging could possibly cause the perimeters of our fragile bay and harbor and its ecosystem to collapse. Is that true? And three, how is this problem being addressed? Port viability depends on constant dredging. Is that true?
It does. When the Corps of Engineers built these channels, they started maintaining the channels back, I think, in the late 1880s, I think. They started maintaining the channels, and there's been a progression of deepening projects ever since then, the most recent one being in 2000. As you've heard from some of the panelists, we don't see the need to go beyond that for anything in the foreseeable future. But there is, as a lot of people know, we've had a recurring shoaling problem at the entrance to Humboldt Bay. That was something that the Corps of Engineers, when they did the deepening project, they actually thought that would lessen the amount of maintenance dredging, which in turn would save some money on the federal side. The federal government pays for that street sweeping of the channels every year. It actually, for some reason, and they don't know why, there's people that attribute it to a lot of different things, but nobody really knows. There's been more maintenance dredging right there. That shoal has continued to build and need constant maintenance every year to keep the entrance open. Now we're working on a project with the Corps of Engineers. We've worked on it for probably 4 years now to develop a project that would actually alleviate that, or at least try to minimize that. We call it our long-term sediment management program. And at the stage they're at, the federal government is required to ante up about half of the funds, or 50% exactly, of the funds for the feasibility study for where they are in the process right now. The local sponsor, which is, in this case, would be the Harbor District, has to come up with the other part of that. Well, that's between $1.5 and $2 million for that, for our local share of that, which is a heavy lift for the Harbor District, of course. We've gone to the state a number of times in all different sorts of venues to try to get the state to contribute to it. In fact, after all, it's state property we're trying to maintain out there. So, and we've been unsuccessful with that. But the federal government continues to have faith that we're going to get that. They see that there's a federal need. Your Board of Commissioners for the Harbor District is unanimous, and they're thinking that that shoal needs to be taken care of. So we're not giving up. We're not working on it. We are working on it, but that's really the main cost of maintenance dredging every year. I know it's a long answer, Bill, but just one more little piece to it. They do maintain the interior channels also, the nearly 10 miles of channels that the federal government owns within Humboldt Bay. Those they take off very little every year. In fact, the Fields Landing Channel, they probably only do maintenance dredging down there about every 3 years. So really the bulk of the maintenance dredging is at the entrance, and that's where we're trying to center that research effort.
Dave, I've heard that the channel on the Samoa side of the bay pretty much scours itself from the water rushing from Arcata Bay towards the channel entrance. Is that true?
Well, it's just basic, hydrology kind of a thing. That's the narrowest point right off the Fairhaven Terminal, and so right off the Fairhaven Terminal has natural areas that are maybe 60 feet deep. That's where the water velocity is the greatest, and so it does. That's why Simpson located a dock there.
So the question asked that it says port viability depends on constant dredging. I guess that's referring to the outside channel entrance, near the mid.
Well, in general, it's yes. The Corps of Engineers will always have an obligation to maintain the channels here, and the way our bay just exists on this piece of the North Pacific, it does require constant or annual maintenance anyway.
Within the harbor or on the?
Well, like we were saying before, mostly at the entrance, but certainly the interior channels, as you know, even at Woodley Island Marina, we have to do maintenance dredging there about every 8 to 10 years. So it's just a thing that just happens in the watershed.
And the question also says constant dredging could possibly cause the perimeters of our fragile bay and harbor and its ecosystem to collapse. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of allegations that, by some, that the deepening project has caused significant erosion in the bay. The Corps of Engineers has looked at this, again, it's their project, so they have the responsibility to look at it. They've looked at it and it's been inconclusive. That doesn't mean it didn't, but that doesn't mean it did either. We did we're just finishing up an effort, kind of integrated wetland strategy effort that we've done in partnership with the Department of Fish and Game and stuff. And that mapped the shoreline of Humboldt Bay since 1850. We took every good survey map we could find since then, plotted them all together, the same GIS kind of thing, so you could watch the bay move and everything. It's a dynamic environment. It moves, particularly around the entrance around King Salmon, Buena Point. The shoreline has moved around there for 100 years.
All right. Any of the panelists can volunteer to answer this question. Regarding a lease for marine terminal for the facilities currently owned by that are owned by the Harbor District, how long would such a lease be if there were to be a lessee? Eric?
I think that, ultimately that's a decision that the district will decide. I will say that, under California law, Tidelands Trust, I believe there would probably be a cap somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 years. Generally speaking, in order to attract sufficient private investment, we would probably need a lease in excess of 30 years. But ultimately, this is a decision that, the district will make along with its financial advisors. Obviously what you want to do is you want to balance the fact that the district wants to retain the asset with the desire to attract enough investment to actually afford all of the improvements that are necessary.
Thank you. You have a comment, Dave? Okay, regarding the railroad, my understanding is that there is a lease on the North Coast Railroad Authority roadbed now held by Northwestern Pacific. Would anybody want to volunteer to say how long that lease is for? Does anybody know?
I have no idea.
That's
a long term lease, but I don't know exactly how long.
My understanding is it's more than 30 years. I guess another question is, is it likely that Goldman Sachs is here tonight, they've been looking at this. Is it likely that whoever ends up operating a marine terminal, if that were to occur, would they have a leasehold interest or a sublessee position in the railroad as well, or would it be a separate relationship or position?
It's certainly something that I think that we would continue to look at, and the district will probably continue to look at, as well as all of the railroad parties. Ultimately, however, I think what makes an intermodal port successful is having coordination between the railroad and the terminal. And that's part of the reason that Prince Rupert is so successful, is because CN actually owns an equity interest in the terminal. And that's not necessarily required here, but it's something that we would probably continue to look at. But the bottom line is that if the railroad charges too much, then the terminal won't be utilized. So what we have to do is figure out a way to ensure that the railroad's interests are aligned with the terminal operator's interests. And ultimately, what is the best mechanism to achieve that is something that I think we need to continue to study.
Thank you. Here's a question about receiving more money from the Headwaters Fund. Do you expect to receive more money from the Headwaters Fund to spend on the Redwood Dock Terminal project? And if so, when do you expect to receive that? I think that goes to Dave.
Well, as you said, Bill, we received that $200,000 for the feasibility study and business plan. As we're getting to the end of that, that'll be the end of that contract. As I mentioned in my slideshow, the next step will be, of course, to start in the CEQA process. And it is a possibility that we could go back to the Headwaters Fund, depending on how much that we get an estimate of how much that process might cost. We may go back to the Headwaters Fund as a possible source to help fund that.
On that, I wasn't expecting the subject to come up tonight, but as the one who wrote the MOU for the Headwaters Fund, the Headwaters Mitigation Fund back in late 1996, and the money was awarded on March 1st, 1999. I might just recall that one of the primary purposes of that $22 million that was received by the County of Humboldt was for public infrastructure, specifically for port and rail development. And so I hope that if you do go back to the Headwaters Fund, the Headwaters Committee members keep that in mind. Let's see. Regarding ballast, perhaps somebody can ballast water and organisms that are found in ballast water. This is written to Dave Hull. Can ballast release be regulated locally, and how is the ballast ordinance implemented locally?
That's a good question. That's one of the things that we've always taken pride in at the Harbor District. We were the first port on the west coast of North America to implement a ballast water exchange program back in 1986. It soon was followed by the state of California having their own rule to require that at all the ports. And actually, the State Lands Commission sends people up here when a freighter comes in so they can test the water to make sure that the ballast water has been exchanged. We actually, this was a good question for this kind of a forum, because where the district got got the marching orders, I guess, to pursue some sort of a ballast water management program was at a Humboldt Bay symposium back in 1996. Through a panel and group just like this, the thought was there was worry about it, we needed to do something about it. After the symposium, the district and the stevedore company at that time got together, and we actually borrowed a lot of information from the Great Lakes that had really kind of pioneered this thing and implemented the program here.
But I think it was, as you said, the first
It
on the
was.
West Coast.
It was. Yeah, within a year or two, some Vancouver, I think, and then Oakland actually started including them. And then, like I said, the state took over the program.
In other words, the state is enforcing the ordinances adopted by the local entities.
No, the state took over. They created a program that went beyond ours and took. So we essentially don't have a program now because it's a state program and it's managed by the State Lands Commission.
This question is for Glenn Yamaguchi. If I can get this right. Where was the Jones Act vessel built? Where are Jones Act vessels built? And could our industrial maritime land be utilized to build more such ships here?
The Jean Ann was built in Mississippi, Pascagoula. And as far as building a U.S. ship in this area, you have to have a shipyard that was capable of handling that size, building that size ship. The actual size is about 680 feet long and 10 stories high.
All right. Earlier, I mentioned that the question of air quality would probably come up. Although I don't have any cards to that effect right now, I'll just try to pose the question, or structure a couple of questions. Would any of you be prepared to comment on the manner in which air pollution in ports in the United States is being addressed today by regulation? And what are the problems with air pollution in ports? Okay.
I live in LA, so I'll try that one.
Okay, good luck.
And I don't pretend to be an expert on this subject at all. But what I'll tell you is that over the past 5 or 6 years, especially in a place like Los Angeles, it has become very, very important. Basically, the pollution emitted by vessels with the diesel that they burn is a lot of particulate matter. What the carriers are switching to, and what's happening in the LA Harbor area is kind of leading this charge for the nation. What we expect will happen in the industry is that the regulations imposed in Los Angeles are starting to be adopted in Oakland, up and down the West Coast, and will probably come into New York and the rest of the major harbors. But basically, they're starting to burn what's known as a low sulfur fuel, which has helped reduce the particulate matter. The other concern with vessel operations in a place like Los Angeles is simply the number and volume of vessels that are coming in and going out. And so by doing two things, and you can find a lot of this information, I think, on the Port of Long Beach website, and also the Port of Los Angeles website, is burning low sulfur diesel fuel and slowing the speed on approach and departure. And that is helping to bring the numbers down to meet what's called the CARB regulations, California Air Resource Board, I think is what it stands for. The other source of pollution in operating a main marine terminal is the equipment that we operate on the terminal. What we call yard hostlers. It's basically a truck that moves the containers around. The CARB regulations are changing. As our automobiles have become more efficient and less emitting of bad stuff, so is the machinery that we have to operate now. And that, as I mentioned earlier, has become a big expense for us, is switching out the old equipment and bringing in the new equipment that we have to have by a certain timeline to meet CARB regulations. So, to answer the question, I think that it's an industry-wide issue that doesn't have a national policy to it, but is being addressed locally or port by port, and we're trying to get ahead of this. Everybody wants to be the green operator or the green carrier, and so a lot of the companies are investing in the equipment ahead of the curve so that they can certainly be in compliance as we see the regulations on the horizon. So,
Eric.
Just to add to that, Tom is completely correct. There's a huge movement within the industry that's encouraged not only by regulations, whether they be at the state level or by the ports themselves, but also just independently by the terminal operators. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because when you look at the concessions or the long-term leases that have been contemplated by ports currently, all of the ports are requiring that the terminal operators demonstrate their dedication to air quality management as well as other environmental issues, including environmental justice. So, for instance, Port of Portland right now is currently in a concession process, as well as the Port of Oakland. And for both of those concession processes, before you are approved as a potential operator at the port and a potential lessee at the port, you had to prove that you would meet certain environmental standards, and some sort of extra points were given to entities which could demonstrate the fact that they were planning on operating a greener port. And that's something, obviously, that the district will continue to look at as it moves forward here, with what sort of stipulations that they want to place within the concession agreement. And if they want to go beyond state regulations or any sort of federal regulations, that's certainly an ability that the district will have in the concession agreement. And again, ultimately it comes down to balancing the amount of equity that you can generate with your desire to have these extra additional regulations. But again, Tom, Ports America, as well as all the other terminal operators, I think are very much focused on this issue, as well as the carriers themselves, which of course are exploring various options to cut down emissions as the ships come into port.
Thank you. Kind of a follow-up question. My understanding is that there is the bunker fuel is used to move ships around generally in the world today, and that there is an effort to reduce the amount of bunker fuel used when ships are docked, and that some ports are now planning to provide the electrical power from the shoreline to the ship to allow the ship to operate while dockside. Is that correct? Or maybe
yeah, it's called cold ironing. And basically the concept is, instead of having the vessel sit against the pier and run its engines to power the power needed to keep the air conditioning or whatever going on the ship, or lights, or if the ship has its own cranes powered. The idea is to plug the ship in. There's issues with that. That's one solution, is cold ironing. It is relatively expensive from an infrastructure standpoint, because basically you have to build the power lines up to the dock pier and then have the right sort of a hookup. There's other solutions being tried in places like the Port of Oakland. There's other innovations coming out. There's also another solution is to put like a sock on top of the bonnet or the smokestack of the ship while it's in port and run it that way. These different scenarios are being tried, but as we progress and move forward to meet, again, the California Air Resource Board requirements, one of these solutions will come forward as the solution.
Thank you. For any member of the panel who wants to volunteer an answer, can the port revitalization project be viable without the railroad? Sure.
I think ultimately it depends upon what type of port the district would like to see. But if the port would like to continue to grow and have the ability to actually, for instance, bring in containers or anything of that size, again, ultimately depends upon having the ability to bring goods into the central U.S. in particular. And Prince Rupert is a perfect example of how successful a port which specializes in intermodal operations can be. And by intermodal, by the way, I mean when you bring in a box off of a ship and then, for instance, put it on rail, and you're transferring between two different forms of transportation. So ultimately, I think in order for the port to grow, this is something that's addressed, by the way, in the Trans-Systems report most directly. I think that the rail connection is absolutely critical, and so the question is, does the area want to be a Prince Rupert and have all the jobs that goes along with the Prince Rupert type setup, or does it not wish to have this? And if it chooses to grow, then I think it requires those intermodal connections, and the Trans-System report, goes through that in pretty much detail. I've heard from several of the other speakers today how critical the rail is for bringing the boxes in. Otherwise, it's going to continue to just be paper and some of the other products that are currently produced locally.
Thank you. First, the statement. There is a pipeline right-of-way to Red Bluff. Could that be expanded to be used for rail, for shipping by rail? Anybody?
There's been a lot of talk about the Red Bluff connection or possibility. The cost of land acquisition, the cost of engineering would greatly exceed by a magnitude of 2 to 3 or 4 times what it would cost to restore the rail in its existing location.
Okay, Mr. Kramer, you said Ports of America deals with shippers who like to have one standard for all ports. Would you be able to operate a terminal for a green port with much higher environmental standards than other ports? Would anyone?
What I was referring to is that quality standards or ISO standards, basically in process. How we, say for example, the auto customers, I was thinking in particular, how we handle their cars and the damage ratios and how we measure that, so on and so forth. As far as the second part of the question, operating a green, especially green port.
Eureka touched on that.
Yeah. Yeah. The port concessions that are coming out now include, as Eric mentioned, many stipulations surrounding that area and that space. So, yeah.
Okay. Try to phrase this question. Would all vessels, including foreign vessels, permitted in that are permitted in our bay, be required to be double hulled? Is that double hull meaning? I guess
double hull is an issue for tankers and tankers alone. It's not to my knowledge that container ships and breakbulk ships are double hulled. I think that what you're referring to there is in the oil tanker industry or the chemical tanker industry, where by I think it is 2010 or 2011, all vessels operating, as I understand it, all vessels operating moving oil or tankers basically have to be double hulled. It doesn't apply to container ships. It doesn't apply to breakbulk ships, as far as I know.
Okay, I'm going to try to go through. You said 7:30, but I'm going to try to go through the last ones I have here. Statement: dioxin, that is, organic chemicals, are present in Arcata Bay. Are oysters raised in Humboldt Bay tested for organic chemicals? If not, why not?
Oysters are tested for organic chemicals in Humboldt Bay, have been for about 30 years.
Thank you. This is another one for the oyster growers, Greg Dale and Ted Geiger. Will the development of a green port hurt your business in mariculture?
I don't believe it will. There's been ships coming in and out of here for 100 years. We've been here for 100 years, and I think we can coexist easily.
Okay. And then for the panel, do you think money generated from a green port could be used to restore salmon runs? And secondly, do you think salmon runs on Humboldt Bay will be helped or hurt by a port terminal? I know Dave is are you a fisheries biologist?
Yes, I am. One of the things that the district has said for a long time is that we need that the port. Let me rephrase that. The harbor portion of the bay is the place where the district has the potential to generate some funds that we can use for our other missions that maybe don't generate so much funds. Recreation and the conservation efforts that we do, typically we do out of our own pocket from the general fund we get, which comes out of Humboldt County taxes, or from grants. If we had develop a profitable venture out here, then those funds could be used to expand those conservation recreation things. As far as hurting or helping salmon, the way we've actually done a great project just the last year. We're doing it again starting very soon here, where we're actually tracking salmon smolts through Humboldt Bay, and based on what we're finding there, it's not going to be a problem for the ships.
Thank you. And I guess this is a key question that perhaps several of you would want to comment on this. Would the restoration of the railroad and the creation of a marine terminal create jobs? Would these jobs come from this area? Are these jobs long-term as well as short-term jobs?
Oh, yeah. That's the short answer. The answer is, as a stevedoring company, our job is to manage the labor. The labor is the ILWU labor. There's a lot of ILWU jobs up and down the West Coast. They're very high-paying jobs. I think the average wage is close to $100,000 a year, base wage, with full benefits, full 401k investment. They're very good jobs. They're dangerous. They're hard. They're difficult jobs. But as far as pay scale and does it attract jobs in the maritime industry? Absolutely. Not just the ILWU or the union jobs, and I say ILWU because all the work on the marine terminal is done by the ILWU. Okay. There's additional jobs that are generated. For example, I think the model let's talk about if we were to start moving automobiles through this port, the ILWU, the union members unload the ship and bring it to the cargo, the cars, to what we call the place of rest. From the place of rest, it moves to an auto processor. And what an auto processor is, they basically take the car after it's been discharged, clean it, inspect, well, first inspect it, clean it, add the radio, put on different hubcaps, whatever it's going to be, and then it's sent out on a rail car or a truck to the dealer. So they prep the car. So when it gets to the dealership, they put the stickers on it, all that stuff. They prep the car. So when it gets to the dealership, it could be immediately put into sale or into inventory. Those are additional jobs that would come with automobiles, for example. So it's not just the ILWU jobs, which this community has about 20 members currently. Last time I checked, a place like Stockton has about 75 members, active members. A place like LA has about 4,000. But there are very good jobs, and that's all I can say about that. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Sure. In addition to all the jobs that are actually provided for on dock, there are of course all of these sort of ripple effects. And there might include, for instance, distribution centers that might ultimately develop. And as a matter of fact, the Trans Systems report that's on the web, I believe indicated that for every job that's created on dock, there's an extra 1.5 jobs that are created within the local community as well.
Yeah.
When the railroad was fully staffed and running, in Humboldt County alone, there would be approximately 100 employees. That would include maintenance away personnel as well as operating personnel.
Was most of the employment on the railroad in Humboldt County, or Mendocino would have, what, about the same, or a little bit less?
No, Mendocino would have a little fewer, but combined Mendocino-Sonoma would have 150.
Here's another question on the railroad, and it's nearly 7:37. We've run over 5 minutes. Please be patient. I'm going to try to get this wrapped up. This is one on the rail corridor. It was touched on a little bit earlier, but the earlier question about going east was about the PG&E right-of-way. This question is, how about looking at a completely new route, follow the top of South Fork Mountain towards Red Bluff, crossing no rivers and starting to head directly to the east. Could also be used for winter recreation. Put current alignment to bed. Comments? If you want to start out, Dan?
Well, Long Ridge that stretches roughly from Lord Ellis to past Ruth Lake would be a perfect right-of-way. It's the longest unbroken ridge in the United States. But the problem would be, how do you get freight trains up there, and how do you get them back down again? That both takes a lot of room and a lot of purchase of right-of-way to be able to do that. If we were starting over again, it might have been a good idea in the first place. But today, the cost of both the construction and purchase of right-of-way would far exceed the cost of restoring the line.
Any other comments? Okay. Regarding cruise ships, how do you explain the fact that only 2 cruise ships have come to Humboldt Bay over the past 10 years, but the Trans-System report projects 42 per year to pay off the revenue bonds? Where are all these ships going that are not coming here now? You got the question, Dave? Or okay, Dave?
Well, the short answer is that was Trans-System's estimate, and that's a great question for Trans-Systems. We're in the process, and that's a good one to ask them. But let me just give it a little bit broader answer on where that is. Where the market that we've been able to capture now, where those couple of ships in the last few years have come from, is what they call repositioning cruises. These are ones that maybe you're doing a summer route up in Alaska, and then they move down to Mexico to work in the winter. And as they go by, occasionally we can hook one of those to come in here. Those are, as you can tell, they're few and far between. It's not really the market that we'd like to have. What we'd really like to have here is a regular itinerary, albeit maybe only 5 months a year, but a regular itinerary that includes maybe some other California ports or some other Pacific Northwest ports. And that's what we're working on marketing with some of the associations that we belong to. Now, Trans-Systems, again, it's their analysis of the information that they've accumulated, and it is something that they need to be. There needs to be more explanation of it when they come out with the final draft. But they had looked at those same things. They contacted cruise lines, and they were not only looking at those repositioning cruises. They were looking at individual itineraries and things like this too. So it was a bigger picture. But certainly, we have received a number of comments, and in fact, even in-house, we've wanted Trans-Systems to do a better job of explaining how they came up with those estimates.
Thank you, Dave. 2 final questions. Describe who will be responsible for the cleanup of what this writer believes will be the inevitable oil spill that will result from the proposed quantum leap in large ship traffic in the bay. Who will be responsible for an oil spill? Is that Dave's?
I guess.
The shippers want to
It's the ship and the ship's insurance that deals with paying for the cost of those things. Now, these, in some cases, the litigation amongst whose fault it really is can go on for, a decade. But typically, it's the responsible party, and the responsible party is the ship that has caused the spill.
And don't we have this is kind of a follow-up question, just about a quarter mile away, don't we have a oil spill response team located here on Humboldt Bay?
Yeah, we have a couple of oil spill response organizations that are here. One of them is down here at Schneider Dock. We actually have a lot of Coast Guard response equipment that's over at Redwood Marine Terminal right now. That's stored there.
All right. And unless there's somebody who wants to hand in another question, this would be the final one. Would it be possible to use electric trucks at our docks like the Port of Long Beach? Electric trucks, can they be utilized?
The electric trucks that are being trialed at the Port of Long Beach are just that. They're just being trialed. The other solution is natural gas powered trucks that are also being trialed in the terminals. Okay, so that technology hasn't been proven yet, and once it gets proven, it will, I would imagine, would be adopted.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everybody here tonight, and the panelists especially. And I'd like to ask, Pete has an announcement, and then I'd like one more person to come up here and say a few words.
After the final presenter here, I would encourage you to come up here and visit and ask some questions directly to the panelists, and maybe a 10-minute or 15-minute time span to allow that. So I would encourage you to do that, and encourage you guys to put up with us a little longer.
Thank you, Pete. I know several people in the room are getting hungry, but I would like to ask Sid Berg, who's the president of the local Building Trades Council, to pretty much conclude the evening for us with his insights. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank everybody, first of all, for coming and attending this. I think we got a lot of additional information. We've been going to a lot of meetings, all of us, and it seems like every meeting you pick up a few more points and maybe learn a little more. I've been getting a lot of input and feedback on why are the building trades so enthused or supporting this railroad idea. Are we really going to get that many jobs? Our take on it is this is infrastructure. This is no different than building highways or sewer plants or water treatment plants. The jobs, we need jobs in this area, and we need to build an infrastructure for the future, for the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And this is the infrastructure that we need. There's a lot of talk about manufacturing, light manufacturing, mom and pop businesses. The biggest problem we hear in this area is we cannot get our product in and out of this county. We're geographically challenged. We've got 199 from the north, we've got 101 in the south, they all wash out in the wintertime. 299 has wildfires go on most of the time in the summer and snow in the winter. So, we need infrastructure, and that's what this is about. And everyone in this room is an environmentalist. I've surfed in this bay, I've dove out between the jetties, I know what's under there. We need to do it. We need to work constructively together and see that we can build the best possible project for the future of this community, this region. So, anyway, I'd like to thank the panelists and everybody that showed up tonight. And let's talk about what we can constructively build together. If we can get product out of here at a reasonable rate, our small mom and pop businesses, the little breweries here, the innovative technology and businesses that we've incubated here in this county can survive and thrive for the future for generations. So anyway, thanks a lot for coming, and let's all work together and get something done. Thank you.